Mr. Scott Horton. You guys might know him as the founder of the Libertarian Institute, a writer on antiwar.com, and the author of the fantastic book, Fool's Errand. How you doing, Scott?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Dude, I've been a fan of yours for quite a while. I just started reading Fool's Errand just this week.
Great.
Not finished with it, unfortunately, but it's fantastic so far. Loving every second of it.
Thanks.
But yeah, I'm just jazzed to have you on the show. And more importantly, jazzed to have you in the Libertarian Party now. It's been a while. So I guess the $1 million question everyone wants to know, what finally changed your mind and convinced you to join the LP?
Well, it's all about Jacob Hornberger's race for the presidency. Essentially, he's one of my very favorite libertarians in the world. He's good on everything in the world. And I'm really excited about all of the possibilities wrapped up in his nomination and his participation in the general election as the Libertarian Party candidate in 2020. And so that's what it's all about. I joined up, I signed up for a lifetime membership. It's not, Hornberger's really he's the task right now. But I think, for a long time, there's been a seeming division between the libertarian movement, or much of the libertarian movement, and the Libertarian Party as almost entirely different animals from each other. And yet I think the party itself should be, obviously has the potential to be the most powerful tool that we have to spread libertarianism and teach libertarianism to the American people at large, and for that matter, to whoever's listening in the world. And so, to be frank about it, we haven't had a good candidate for president in 20 years. And I really like Michael Badnarik, and I pretty much like Gary Johnson, Bob Barr. But the point is that none of these guys really were able to bring libertarianism to the American people in a way that really mattered, essentially. And I think Hornberger, he really solves one of the main problems that the Libertarian Party has faced, which is there's this dichotomy. I think mostly it's a false dichotomy, but there's some truth in it, between the radicals and the pragmatists. And so certainly from the pragmatists' point of view, the idea is, well, if we're all just a bunch of ideological libertarian radicals, then we're just going to scare away every mom and dad and every reasonable person around, and we're not going to get anywhere. So we put teaching libertarianism first, then, we won't get anywhere. Instead, if we run a Bob Barr, for example, who's a famous guy, who's a former Republican congressman, who will be able to get on TV and will be able to get some donations and will be able to drive up some new membership in the party, well, then that'll be good and grow the party. And it'll show, that we're adults who wear suits and we know what we're doing, that we're serious business here. And we have, these former congressmen running who have reputations and things like this. So that makes a lot of sense for what it's worth. And not only that, but they look at the radicals, and a lot of the times they say, well, the radicals are totally missing the point. The radicals are off on some tangent and, arguing a point that nobody really cares about, or that is something that, is beside the point. Like one example was in 2004, a big part of our candidate's message was, I promise I'll never take your guns. Well, that's great. But he was running against an incumbent Republican president of the United States, George W. Bush, who had let the assault weapons ban expire already. And there wasn't one red-blooded man in this country who thought that George W. Bush, of all people, was coming for his guns. So the idea was, and it was a principle for gun ownership and against gun control, and that's great. No, I wouldn't say sell that short or soft pedal it, far from that. But just, you can't make a whole campaign around that when you're running against an incumbent Republican who happens to be, his other name, his middle name is not W. His middle name is Iraq War II. This is a guy who started a war, lied us into one. So that's what we ought to be running on. And we could be radically opposed. That's just one example. We could be radically opposed to our government's policies. We can be, and Hornberger is not an anarcho-capitalist. He's not in a contest to see who's the most libertarian man in the room, as far as, just a ridiculous contest about, well, I want to use SWAT teams to abolish the water department first, or whatever, kind of I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but just the idea of a lot of libertarians, maybe sometimes including myself, we spend a lot of times on libertarian theory that isn't impressive. So Hornberger's a guy though that has the whole package. He's the right kind of radical who is essentially, he's the pragmatic choice. He's the guy that checks off all the boxes that the pragmatists want, which is somebody who looks good in a suit, who is a respectable professional adult. Hornberger's passed the bar. He was a lawyer. He's a Future Freedom Foundation guy now, but he's got an advanced degree, speaks proper English, like Ron Paul. He's this total square character. He's not a counterculture guy, right? There you go. I got the hat on.
Yep.
He's not a counterculture guy. He's a totally square character with these perfectly radical libertarian politics, but essentially they're extremely American. They're extremely, and in Hornberger's case especially, he really is a Declaration of Independence guy. He really loves those kind of, the very best quotes of all of America's founders. He's really kind of into that. And not in like a fetishist way where he just talks about George Washington and the Constitution all the time, but just that he sounds like, and he is a patriotic American who really believes in freedom, who really understands freedom. And not only that, who really understands the major issues that our country is facing right now that everyone is upset about, whether it's war and terrorism or whether it's the crisis with the cost of healthcare or the, immigration or whatever it is that people are upset about, drug abuse and drug wars and all the things that are the most controversial topics in America. He's got the great libertarian answer for all of them. And so if you're a pragmatist, you should look at Hornberger and say, well, we don't need a governor. We don't need, a former congressman who, has that kind of respectability. This is just the right kind of respectability we need. And it comes with a full-fledged libertarian package. This is not Andre Maru or some guy who doesn't even really understand libertarianism up there. I don't want to pick on Lincoln Chafee because I think he's a nice person and I think he is genuinely an anti-war guy, but he's a guy who he wants to run and be our standard bearer, but he's brand new to libertarianism and doesn't really know much about it. And whereas here we have a guy in Hornberger who, could stand up and teach any of us, right? He could give a lecture to wow the whole faculty at Mises, right? And at the same time, he can talk to everybody's mom and dad and everybody's next door neighbor liberal and next door neighbor conservative too. So I just think he's got the whole package for us. He writes every day, 30 years straight. The guy writes every single day at fff.org. So not only is he, again, good on principle, but he really is up to date on every kind of current event, every important issue in America. He's written about it and thought deeply about it. And I read him every day and I know there's nothing for you to be disappointed in. It's not like he's going to come out and be like, that's why we need more charter schools or some garbage that makes you throw your TV out the window. That's not going to happen ever. He's good on everything already. And so I'm really looking forward to this because we have a whole year to make what I think we can make a whole Ron Paul revolution out of this. I think we can make a serious, you know what? Here's what it is. I'm just rambling now, but you like it. I can tell. Here's the deal. None of us are billionaires. None of us control the Chamber of Commerce in our giant city that we live in. None of us are a governor or a senator or have real power and influence. How are a bunch of regular people like us ever to really move the margin? How are we ever to really, make a difference? And the deal is this, that in a presidential campaign like this is essentially the most bang for your buck that you're ever going to get in terms of your ability as a regular person to have influence in the larger political conversation in the country like a really rich, powerful person could. And so in a presidential campaign, a guy like Hornberger of modest means and a bunch of guys like you and me of modest means can come together, make an event out of this, make a year-long massive public relations stunt centered around this man's speaking tour on behalf of peace and liberty and sound economics and everything that all Americans ought to be able to agree on, the real libertarian solution to everything. And it'll be huge. And it'll grow the party. It'll make the party look good. It'll bring in new members and it'll, check off all the boxes that the pragmatists are concerned about and have a right to be concerned about, while also He's the choice of the millennials and the Mises Caucus guys, and all the young new people who are joining the party already like this guy too. So here we're all the newcomers joining the party and pushing this guy. But who are we pushing? Hornberger, everybody's hero. Good old faithful Hornberger from FFF, who's already right about everything, who, used to be a party member for a very long time and has roots in the party and has friends in the libertarian movement and in the Libertarian Party all over the country already. He's a guy everybody can agree on. He's totally good on everything already. And so it just seems like, wow, what an awesome opportunity we have falling right in our lap. It's just like when Ron Paul declared I remember the day in 2007 when they leaked, and we were the first ones to know at antiwar.com, or first or second to know at antiwar.com, that Ron Paul's announcing an exploratory committee today to run for president. And it was like, oh my God, are you kidding? Just think of what we can do. Just think of the potential that we have now to run a presidential campaign. And in this case, too, he'll be running in the general all the way up till November. We got a full year. And once he gets the nomination, if we can get him the nomination, I don't want to assume too much, but we got to work hard and do it. But if we can get him the nomination, then he can make such hay out of Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren or Joe Biden or whoever they stick us with, Hillary Clinton or whoever's the Democrat nominee. No. Yeah. And then we're just going to have the greatest time in the world. And I don't know, how well or to what degree you participated in the Ron Paul revolutions of 08 and 12. But let me tell you, a lot of great libertarians were made. A lot of great friends were made. A lot of beer got drank. A lot of people got married. A lot of cool stuff happened out of that, man. Community was made. The libertarian movement, it became the liberty movement, but right. That wasn't really costing anything. They didn't really take the liberty out of it. They dropped the Aryan part. Just God, that's a bad double entendre. They dropped the end of that just to make it easier for people to hear and not characterize it as something so specific that they would have to change who they are into something else. But just, don't you love liberty? Whether you lean left or whether you lean right, if you're American at all, we're the liberty movement. Everybody likes that kind of thing. But still, anti-war was there, anti-drug war, hard money, and everything that we believe in was all still part of the liberty movement. So that's the whole same thing. And in fact, we could use some good national level exposure and leadership to show the American people the libertarian movement ain't over. We're here. We're against everything. And we're right about everything. We always were. If you'd only listened to us all along, we'd have never done X, Y, or Z, and everything would be fine right now. And so, we're not going to win. I'm not trying to be silly and say we're going to beat Donald Trump in the fall or whatever. But I'm just saying this can be the greatest PR stunt for freedom since Ron Paul's revolutions, which were earth-shattering and world-changing for, everything. Alter the course of history forever. So how about that?
Absolutely. And I remember those Ron Paul days very well. I mean, I was brand new to libertarianism back in 2008. Like, I became a libertarian, and then a week later, someone's like, "Hey, Ron Paul, have you checked this guy?" I'm like, "Oh, cool. There's other people like me? I had no idea. And one of them is running for president? Holy crap, that's amazing." So yeah, I looked at the guy, got the hoodie, still wear it, wore it out today. It's awesome stuff. That's kind of one of the things that the liberty movement has kind of been missing since 2012. Ron Paul was such a unifying figure. He was a guy that we could all get behind. And since then, we haven't really had that. Yeah, we had 2 runs of Gary Johnson, which I don't hate Gary Johnson in any way, but he's no Ron Paul. I think we can all agree on that. He has too many silly moments. He's not as charming as Ron Paul. He's prone to gaffes. What is Aleppo? And that's the one thing people remember about him, is he doesn't know where Aleppo is. And nothing else matters. It's just that one stupid gaffe. And that's all. That's all anybody ever remembers from him. That and the stupid tongue thing. But yeah.
Well, that was because, the What's Aleppo, they really did set him up. I mean, they interrupted him in the middle of Yeah, they interrupted him in the middle of an answer about an entirely different topic. And he didn't say and now turning to the war in Syria, what's your position on what's happening in Aleppo right now? He didn't say that. He just interrupted him in the middle of an entirely different subject and said, "What about Aleppo?" And he goes, "Huh?" And they're like, "Oh, gotcha." But the thing is, though, is that, it fit with the rest of his personality and persona too. So that was why it stuck. He even coined the phrase. He screwed up something else. I forgot the detail. He screwed up something else a week later, and he goes, I guess that's another Aleppo moment. He coined his own phrase, Aleppo moment, for when Gary Johnson can't think of something, like, for God's sake. Now, you don't have that with Ron Paul, because Ron Paul reads all day. Ron Paul really cares about this stuff. Gary Johnson doesn't. Gary Johnson doesn't. He never read a Rothbard essay to the end. He don't know nothing. Ron Paul is a real economist. Ron Paul's a real historian. Ron Paul is the greatest congressman, the greatest parliamentarian in all of world history for a generation. He was a world historical figure. Gary Johnson's just some guy. No offense to him. I'm just some guy too. But I'm just saying, with Hornberger, look, Hornberger doesn't have Ron Paul's legendary status, but he could earn one over this next year. He's in just the right spot to do so.
Well, see, Ron Paul didn't have the Ron Paul legendary status until he ran for president either. I mean, yes, he ran for president in '88.
With some of us, he did. But
the general audience didn't know him.
But, yeah.
Like, I had no idea who he was.
Right.
I would guess that 90 to 95% of Americans had no idea who Ron Paul was, but he ran for president, and he so radically differed from the rest of the Republican crowd that you couldn't help but look at him. I mean, here you have all these stuffy suits up on stage saying the exact same thing, right? And here's this one dude, this old man coming out and going, no, all these guys are wrong. This is what we need to do. We need to end the wars. We need to bring the troops home. We need to slash this, slash that, end the Fed, this, that. And everyone else is just kind of looking at him like he's crazy. And he's just like, yeah, man, I'm going to be remembered long after you guys have forgotten, because none of you are going anywhere. And that's where we're at today. All those guys that were up on stage with him, they didn't start a movement. None of those guys led a movement anywhere. Ron Paul did, and that's because he had the audacity to be different and to speak truth when all these people just simply wanted to pander to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
So you're walking into the
got that too. Hornberger, that's his whole thing too, is he won't back down. When Giuliani said, I demand you take that back, he goes, look, the CIA calls it blowback. It means consequences of things CIA does, and so he wouldn't back down one bit, no matter what, even, with the meanest bully in the room in a crowd full of people who all agreed with the bully and all booed him. He didn't care. And Hornberger's that same way too. Hornberger, you know what? He's unapologetic, but he ain't rude. He's just saying, and he's just giving, honesty its due. And sometimes the truth hurts like hell. Sometimes, you have to face that something is ugly. He wrote an article last week about these two officers who died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. And he said, look, the reason this war is still going on, essentially, is because we refuse to just say out loud and admit these men died for nothing. You threw their lives away for nothing. Now, nobody wants to say that because it makes you sound like a real jerk. And God, what if their widows heard you? You could crush what's left of their broken heart. But why are they dead? We lost this war 15 years ago. What the hell were they doing there?
Exactly.
And we can't say that because it'll dishonor. Go ahead.
Yeah, and all we're doing now is just creating more of those widows. It's just creating more of those mothers and fathers who no longer have a son or daughter because they went to fight in a war that was lost a decade ago, and we don't have the balls to admit it and just bring them home. I was in the military for 5 years. I still have friends that go to Afghanistan on deployments, and they come back and nothing's accomplished. They go there for 6 months to a year. They come back for 6 months. They go out again, and nothing ever changes. Nothing's ever accomplished. We're just there propping up a government that in itself does really evil things. So it's like we can't even really claim to be the good guys anymore. We're just there out of pure inertia, essentially.
Right. Yep. And so, and I'm sorry, because once I get talking about Afghanistan, I'll go off on a tangent. The point is that Hornberger is man enough to be mean enough to just say the truth and say, look, the fact that we won't admit the truth because of people's feelings in that way, which after all, it's a touchy subject. You're talking about people dying in usually very violent circumstances and stuff, right? So nobody wants the father of a dead soldier, to hear him say it was for nothing in a way that's going to enrage him or hurt him, the surviving dad. But at the same time, come on, man, we have to be able to have this conversation. We can't let a bunch of think tank weenies hide behind the enlisted men in order to continue to push a policy that just continues to make the same errors. And Hornberg's the kind of guy who he'll never back down on that, dude, on any one of these wars. He'll get out there, and if they say, well, I'm a gold star parent and I say, how dare you? He is going to say, listen, I'm sorry, but you brought it up, so here's the real answer. And he's not going to back down. He's going to tell them the truth.
Wes,
And anti-war is, at the core of his message is against especially the entire terror war as it exists, but for that matter, all of the encroachment in and build up in Eastern Europe and the pivot to Asia and all of this. He, is for a completely Switzerland foreign policy, a limited republic foreign policy, a complete renunciation of the doctrine of global dominance.
that would be actually fantastic. And then it kind of reminds me, you were talking about how he would have the guts to actually stand up to an emotional situation. It reminds me of Gary Johnson at the same exact moment back in his run for president, where a woman whose son died of an overdose
I remember
confronted him about his stance on legalizing drugs. And here he had the perfect opportunity to explain exactly why it is that prohibition was the cause of her son's death, that it was prohibition that was killing Americans, that was driving up the debt, that's doing all these terrible things. And instead, we just completely whipped on the issues. Like, oh no, I'm just for legalizing weed, nothing else, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, you don't have to be a dick about it. See, there's ways to go about it. You don't have to be a dick. You don't want to be a dick to a grieving mother. That's not the point here. The point here is there are ways for you to explain how it was prohibition itself, not the existence of heroin or cocaine or whatever the drug was. It's the prohibition that killed him. And you can explain that step by step by step in a way that isn't being an asshole. And that's what we need when it comes to someone explaining foreign policy. Yes, you have to be able to explain step by step by step, this is what's killing us. This is why our foreign policy absolutely needs to change. And I'm not being a dick here. I understand you're grieving because your son died, but let me explain to you in as kind a way I can that this war is only going to create more widows. It's only going to create more mothers, more fathers without a son. It's only going to bankrupt this country faster, and it's not going to accomplish anything. So that's what Ron Paul was able to do. That's what Gary Johnson wasn't able to do. And it sounds like you believe that Hornberger is going to be able to do that once again.
No question about it. Look, and here's the deal. Again, the guy writes an article every single day at fff.org. So there's no question about what he thinks about all this stuff. And so again, he's the perfect mix of uncompromising on principle and also knows what he's talking about when it comes to the real world that we're living in. Not just knows what he's talking about when it comes to what is exactly what a libertarian should say about Article 1, Section 8 or something like that, but what is it that a libertarian should say to any average American out there, whether they lean left or whether they lean right or whether they're a party partisan or whatever it is, how to address the major issues that are affecting America. And look, it's no coincidence, as the commies would say, that all of our worst issues are all problems caused by our national government in the first place. Our terrorism problem and foreign policy problem is all generated in Washington, D.C. The artificially high costs of healthcare and education are all because of the socialist interventions and subsidies and manipulations of the market. Congress and the regulators siding with the suppliers against the customers, mostly, right? Making the supply side king instead of the customer king, like it is in free market capitalism. The immigration crisis, our government on one hand bombs and ruins and destroys and forces drug wars and coup d'etats on all these Latin American countries and create this artificially high rate of immigration and refugees coming to the country. And then also they subsidize their health, education, and welfare of anyone who wants to come here. Now, all of us who have to work for a living, we not just have to pay for our groceries, but now immigrants can come and get a Lone Star card and go to HEB for free. I got to pay $300 a week in groceries. They get to eat for free. What in the hell? And so on one hand, we're subsidizing and increasing immigration that way with all these pro-immigration. First of all, destroying Latin American countries. Second of all, subsidizing immigration. And then to fix the problem, we have a national police force crackdown and essentially what they call the Constitution-free zone for 100 miles within the southern border, where anyone can be stopped and searched and whatever without any of the previous pretensions of probable cause and this kind of thing. And all to crack down people separated from their kids and all this crisis going on because on one hand, we have these pro-immigration programs, and on the other hand, we have these anti-immigration programs. The libertarian solution is the solution to that, not just for libertarians, but for people, anyone who leans right or anyone who leans left. That answer ought to be good enough, you know? And anyway, same thing for all of this stuff. And Hornberger's already ready already. So, and what's cool is we're not having this conversation in 2022 thinking about, man, that could have been cool. But instead, we're having it in November 2019 when we have a full year. So all we got to do is all of us have to figure out, and it sounds like you're way ahead of me on this game. We all just got to know the rules for joining our state parties, knowing when we have to elect ourselves and each other as delegates to the national convention. Make sure we show up at our state conventions and get those delegate spots and commit to doing this work. And the real fun's going to start after the nomination, right? But we can get started now. And, you know, we have essentially 6 months until the convention. We have half a year until the convention, and then we have another half a year after. And so, you know, let's make a Jacob Hornberger revolution out of it. And you know what? Let's test it and see if I'm right. Let's get him out there and see what he says. I guarantee you, you know, take my word for it. It's going to work out fine. You'll be pleased with him. There came a point during Ron Paul, I remember in 2008, where it was like, oh, Ron's on CNN. Turn it up, turn it up. But then after a while, I remember like the first time I thought, you know what? I don't even need to turn it up. I know what he's going to say. And I know it's going to be great. You know what I mean? I know I can count on him every time. He's going to say, well, Wolf, the only way to shore up Social Security is to abolish the empire. It's just too expensive. You know, I know he's going to say that every single time. And so, in fact, Hornberger's more radical than that on the welfare state stuff for sure. But that's how it's going to be with Hornberger, where after a little while, you're going to realize, I trust this guy, man, with my message. I don't need to turn up the volume every time. I know when they challenge him on heroin that he's going to be like, listen, lady, I'm really sorry, but it was the drug war that killed your boy. It really was. And I remember watching that CNN thing. Yeah. In fact, it was even worse than you say, because what he did was he actually made the economic case for why a war on heroin can never work. And he talked about, you know, increased potency of doses, which spiked with fentanyl. That's your overdose right there. Yep. But he also talks about when you crack down, then you raise the price. But then that induces all new criminals to enter the market to provide the supply at the increased price anyway. And so economics says this can never work. As long as there's poppies and the ability to refine them, there will be heroin. And the more you crack down, the more supply you're going to get. How ironic and horrible is that? This kind of thing. And then he goes, but I would never do it. I would only legalize pot, though.
He just walks back everything in that moment. It's just like, so dude, oh man. That was one of, like, more than the Aleppo thing. I didn't even care about the Aleppo thing. But that moment just made me slap my forehead. Like, dude, you had it. You had the opportunity that like every other libertarian would die to have. Like, here's my golden opportunity to explain why prohibition sucks.
Yeah, I mean, Ron did great on this. Ron Paul was absolutely great on this. I remember he did an interview. I don't know if anybody could ever find this again. It was in 2008, a sit-down interview with a newspaper in New Hampshire. And they just sat there grilling him for about an hour and a half or something. And man, he was just killing it. It was probably the best Ron Paul interview ever or something. And I remember at one part of it, they're asking him about drugs and they're going, oh, even heroin? And he's explaining the economics of it. And then you know, he's a country doctor, right? Again, just like Hornberger, he's a total square. He's, you know, he's not, it's not like he's sitting here going, yeah, drug abuse is a great way to listen to rock and roll, man, or whatever, you know?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So instead, he says to them, he goes, listen, he goes, just think about all the AIDS. He kind of whispers, you know, he lowers his voice. He goes, just think about all the AIDS, people dying of AIDS. It's just horrible. And it's because they're sharing these dirty needles, because they can't just come out in the open and buy needles at Walgreens. They can't just come out and buy pure heroin at Walgreens and suffer their addiction without at least risking their life every time they shoot up. You know, there's got to be a better way to handle it. And that was what he would say. He goes, look, I'm a doctor. You know, people, I remember they tried to get him on like the gay marriage thing and this and that. They're like, oh, you're a right-wing Christian Republican. What do you think about gay men getting married to each other and stuff? And he goes, you know, I'm a doctor. I kind of look at it like people are people and they feel how they feel and they're going to do what they're going to do. And what the hell do you care? That's fine. And like, people are the way they are. Everybody knows that, you know, like this is a guy, he's just so great. But anyway, on the heroin thing, he was like, he essentially said like, listen, if you're for the war on heroin, you're for AIDS. You're pro AIDS. You're for the proliferation of AIDS. Does that sound right? There's not a better way. Look at all the heroin prohibition we've had since Richard Nixon, and look at all the heroin abuse we've had this whole time. It's not working. It clearly isn't working. It's a double-blind, super-controlled study. We got the proven fact. It's right there in the number. People dropping dead right now. And as you said, it's the black market. It's because it's spiked doses, right? It came out in with Tom Petty died. When Tom Petty died, he was shooting up, spiked with fentanyl, right? And remember the famous actor, the famous method actor with the blonde hair, kind of heavy set guy, really like extremely talented actor. He was like,
we talking Chris Farley?
no, like this. What was his name, man? The guy from whatever. Anyway, there's all these famous people. One of the Kennedy's nieces died last week or something. You know, Robert Kennedy's niece or something died just a few weeks ago. Famous people are getting headlines, dropping dead. Poor people are, you know, they're making headlines too. Body found in Walmart parking lot, babies in the back seat, and all of this. It's the fentanyl. That's what it is. It's the fentanyl is essentially the doses are spiked. Like, oh, we got some real powerful stuff for you here. But what it means essentially is that people misdose. They go, oh, I need this much. But then it turns out that actually this much is twice as potent as it was yesterday, because now it has this other stuff mixed in it. And so they drop dead. They stop breathing. Their heart stops beating, and that's it. And over getting high. And when they could have just gone into CVS and bought some heroin, and they would know exactly what the dose is every time.
Well, exactly. And when
but they wouldn't be dead.
Yeah, it's the iron law of prohibition. When you make something illegal, you're only gonna get the strongest doses of it, because that's what's gonna sell. And when something's illegal and you're peddling in some illegal drugs, you have to get the biggest bang for your buck for every little bit you sell. It's like when prohibition was around. It's funny because we learned this lesson back in the 1920s during the prohibition years. Beer was the most popular drink in America forever. It still is to this day. But during the prohibition years, it was all hard liquor. There's no beer to get around because there was no profit in peddling in illegal beer. So people are going blind and dying from drinking this illegal shit when all they want to do is drink a normal beer. You know, it's the same exact situation you have right now.
And thank goodness it's the same thing with weed too. That because if you get charged the same per pound, then obviously you want to have the best weed possible so you can charge the most for the same quantity, and then you're taking only the same risk. Yep. So all of a sudden people decided that, man, we ought to have a contest for who can make the best smoke. And it's been since about the mid 90s. I mean, when I was a kid, all we smoked was Mexican dirt weed. That was all there was. And then since about 95, 96, ain't seen a bag of swag since, you know? So thank goodness for that part of prohibition, at least. So
we're running against 30 minutes, but I want to know is if you plan on writing a sequel to Fool's Errand. Are we going to get a War on Terror Iraq version? Are we going to get a book about the war in Yemen and Syria? What can we look forward to from the great Scott Horton in the future?
All of the above there. I'm actually Fool's Errand started out, it was chapter 2. So chapter one, Fool's Errand, getting into this mess. Jimmy Carter through Bill Clinton years there. That was chapter one. And then chapter two was Afghanistan. And I just couldn't wrap it up. I was bogged down in the Afghan quagmire. And the thing, once I got through the torture chapter, I was like, look, the torture chapter alone is 20,000 words. And then there's no way by the time I get through the surge, whatever, I'm working on 50,000 words here. This is it's an Afghanistan book. Otherwise the whole book is going to be 600 pages or something, right? So now I'm going back and I'm trying to write the briefer version of all of the wars, including all the stuff I cut out of the beginning of Fool's Errand. So the Iranian Revolution, the Iran-Iraq War, and Iraq War I will all be restored to the beginning. And then it's everything, dude. It's Afghanistan, the boiled down version of Fool's Errand for chapter 2, then Iraq War II, then the drone war in Pakistan, then Somalia, then Pakistan, then Libya, Syria, Iraq War III, then Yemen, and somewhere in there after Libya, we'll do Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Chad, and all of that.
There's just too many places. There's just too much. And then we're going to end
with Yemen, because Yemen is the worst thing in the whole world that's happening right now. And it's at least as bad as Iraq War II. It's an absolute horrific genocide, a deliberate starvation campaign against the people of Yemen right now that America's doing.
Yep.
And
it's nowhere in the news right now. Nobody talks about it.
Yep. So the book is going to be called, so far, some people hate it, but to me, the books just kind of name themselves. I don't know what I'm going to do about it. The last one's Fool's Errand. This one's going to be called Enough Already. Time to End the War on Terrorism.
That sounds good to me. See, I don't know what I want more. You full-time being an activist in the LP for Hornberger, or you just locking yourself away in a room and writing all these amazing books full-time.
Man,
I don't know what I want more, but you're going to be a busy man coming here in the future.
No, I'm trying to split the difference, but it's not easy. Believe me, man. It's not.
There's just not enough Scott Horton to go around. So we're up against 30 minutes. So let's plug your stuff. You founded the Libertarian Institute. You're with antiwar.com. Let us know how to, what you've put out there and how to get a hold of you.
Yeah. So, Libertarian Institute is libertarianinstitute.org. Antiwar.com is antiwar.com. And there's so much great stuff there. I'm the editorial director there. I play an important role, but there are a lot of other people doing incredible work. It's the most important project in the world on the internet. There's nothing else more important than antiwar.com. And then, as you said, the book is Fool's Errand, Time to End the War in Afghanistan. There's an audiobook version if people are interested in that. And I have a brand new book. I don't know if you can see it. The white one back there is The Great Ron Paul. And it's the transcripts of all of my interviews of him, 2004 through 2019. So it's 39 interviews of Dr. Paul, plus a speech I gave last year about how much I love the guy, the great Ron Paul. And then my show is the Scott Horton Show, and it's at scotthorton.org. And I got 5,000 interviews going back to 2003 there at scotthorton.org. Almost all foreign policy stuff there for you.
Absolutely. Fun stuff. All right, Scott, thank you.
JacobForLiberty.com. JacobForLiberty.com is Jacob Hornberger's site. And also the Mises Caucus of the LP is doing a great job helping to organize the Hornberger revolution here. And that's lpmisescaucus.com. And they have lots of information for people there too.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on, Scott. Just a quick update for everybody. We are going to have a special anonymous guest on tomorrow night. It's not going to be a live show. He's on the ground in Hong Kong, so we're not going to do it live. It's going to be a different kind of show. So keep an eye out for that, probably posted on Wednesday or Thursday. This interview will probably go up tomorrow night, Tuesday the 26th. If you like the show, remember to like us on Facebook. We're on Instagram, Twitter, Minds. We're on YouTube. And you can find this podcast, Roads to Liberty, anywhere that podcasts are found. So thank you, Mr. Horton, for coming on the show. Thank you for all you do for libertarianism. And it's an awesome conversation. I hope to do this again sometime.
Thanks very much for having me.
All right. Good night, everybody. You have a good one.